Hi, welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. In the last episode, I gave a lot of context about the music scene in early 1980. Some would say I gave too damn much context. Even then, there were things I wanted to mention in the culture, like the Lake Placid Winter Olympics, where the U.S. men's hockey team had won gold, which turned everybody in the country into a hockey fan for a couple of weeks. Wings tour of Japan fell apart when Paul McCartney was arrested for marijuana possession. People were shocked to learn that there was a live active volcano in the continental United States, Mount St. Helens in Washington, and that it was likely to erupt in a major way, which it did spectacularly later that spring. Into this cultural milieu, the Beach Boys released in March of 1980 their album, Keepin' the Summer Alive. Now this album had a long and torturous gestation period. As we discussed in episodes 4 and 5, the Beach Boys had signed an $8 million contract with CBS Records with the stipulation that Brian Wilson would participate in 75% of Beach Boy product. Their prior album, the first for CBS, the Light album, which came out in 1979, had almost no Brian Wilson participation. The other guys stepped up and produced some fairly strong tracks and turned out actually a pretty good album. They tried to step up Brian Wilson's participation and make good on the promise with their next album, and they began in July of 1979 with sessions at Brian's old stomping grounds, Western Recorders in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, things fell into a very familiar pattern. Brian didn't want to produce. He just wanted to play oldies. He didn't want to work on new material. They recorded Johnny B. Good, the Do Run Run, backing track for an old Corsairs song from 1962 called Smoky Places. They recorded Chuck Berry's School Days, which finally did get finished and make the cut ultimately. But that and the backing track from Smoky Places, which was reused, were the only things that came out of that July session, and they were quickly abandoned. In October of '79, Mike, Carl, and Brian went to Kauai in an effort probably to get Brian out of his local environment and away from, I would guess, some bad influences, so to speak, and also to have him sit down and concentrate on writing some new material. And some songs did come out of those writing sessions in Kauai. Later on in October, recording began properly at Rumbo Studios, which was Daryl Dragon's studio in Los Angeles. Now, once again, they had given up on Brian producing the record, and as they had with the Light album, they brought in Bruce Johnston. And this would be the first album to bear the title Produced by Bruce Johnston, which was only fair and accurate. As I mentioned in the last episode, this was the first album that I purchased after I became a Beach Boy completist. And I walked into the store, saw there was a new Beach Boy album, and saw this cover, and my initial thought was, oh shoot, well maybe they'll make a decent album next year. This album cover did not promise good things. The inner sleeve has photos of the band, the kind of thing you would expect. The outer sleeve, however, is this sort of moronic and very literal cartoon about keeping the summer alive with very poor illustrations of the band, including Bruce. This is the first time Bruce is back on a Beach Boy cover, albeit in cartoon form, since he left the band in 1971. There were no Beach Boys on the cover of his Surf's Up, but he was on the inner sleeve. He also was on the inner sleeve of the Light album, but this is the first time he's back on a Beach Boy outer cover. But this, you know, it had some sort of sci-fi pandering maybe a little bit with this, which, you know, with the dome, which was sort of sci-fi being a big thing at the time with the kids. But this was not what I was hoping for out of the Beach Boys. Now the music itself begins with the title track, Keepin' the Summer Alive, which is a co-write between Carl Wilson and Randy Bachman of Guess Who and BTO fame. Talked about that very extensively in an earlier episode, Randy Bachman Meets the Beach Boys. He also co-wrote a song with Carl that appears on this album called Livin' with a Heartache, which is kind of a country-flavored number. I kind of dismissed it in the earlier episode. I've listened to it again recently, and it's better than I gave it credit for. And it's got a very nice middle eight I'd forgotten about with Carl singing. But both the songs are all right. Keeping the Summer Alive kind of rocks. Interestingly, Bruce Johnston said that Carl weakened it, and I'm not exactly sure how he weakened it or why. And you know, the reputation is that Carl liked to rock and that Bruce was more soft, but Bruce says the opposite, that the song was more rocking and that Carl somehow undefinedly weakened it. I also wondered in that episode why Randy Bachman had not participated more with Carl. And I've since read an interview where he said that he was invited actually to play on these tracks, on the album, but he was going through a divorce. He didn't want to be away from his kids that long, so he passed on going to LA to record. And instead, for Keeping the Summer Alive, the title track, the Beach Boys enlisted Joe Walsh to play rhythm, guitar, and slide guitar, with Carl still playing lead. Second track on the album is the first of the new Mike Love, Brian Wilson compositions. It's called Oh Darlin'. It's kind of a middle-paced, sort of doo-wop number, a little bit of a 50s influence to it. It's probably the closest thing to a romantic ballad on the record, but not particularly memorable in any way. There are three other songs on the album that are new Brian and Mike compositions. The second one being Some of Your Love, which had started its life as a Brian composition called Mike Come Back to LA. And Mike had rewritten the words to make them more universally meaningful. Also a whole lot less interesting, really. It's a little bit like the Child of Winter song. The backing vocals consciously reference Be True to Your School. At the end of the choruses, they completely mimic the backing vocals of Be True to Your School to the point where you think when the verse comes back, he's surely going to say, I got my Letterman sweater with the letter in front. Very self-referential, lyrical motif on Some of Your Love. The other new Mike and Brian songs on the album are a song called Sunshine, which began as the backing track for Smoky Places, morphed into a song called Little Girl, and was finally completed as Sunshine. It's got a steel drum in it. It would have been a nice closer. If they had a strong album, it might have made a nice little tag at the end, like Mama Says on Wild Honey, but as it is, it's just kind of a pleasant nothing. And the fourth and final new Wilson Love composition was a song called Going On, which is probably the strongest thing on the album. It was released as a single A-side, got as high as number 83, so it really didn't do very well. Whenever they do a compilation and they want to choose something from this album to go on that compilation, it's generally the song Going On. Additionally, there were some older songs that were reused, notably When Girls Get Together, another Love Wilson composition, but this one had been tried out and rejected for the Sunflower album in 1970. It had floated around for a while. They worked on it again in 1976, finally released here. It's got a thing called a marxophone on it, and mandolins. A marxophone is a thing like a zither that's played with a little keyboard, or kind of like a dulcimer or something. And it's got horns on it. And the thing is, I mean, it doesn't fit in with the rest of the music on the album, for one thing. And it ultimately, it just kind of plods along. Like it would be a nice backing track for a cartoon of dancing hippos, if that gives you any idea what it's like. Another older track that was revived for Keeping the Summer Alive is Santa Ana Winds, which had been tried out for the Light album. Apparently this was like a Brian Wilson idea that Alan Jardine sort of ran with and completed, which happened with some other compositions like Loop-de-Loop, that Brian would kind of start with a very basic thing. Alan would get interested and sort of take it over. It begins with a very earnest kind of introduction, explaining what the Santa Ana Winds are, the type of thing that the Kingston Trio might well have prefaced their own song with. It's very Kingston Trio-esque in kind of a cool way. I like it. It's very Allen. It's not a bad track at all, one of the stronger things on the album. The final song on the album is a thing called Endless Harmony, which is a Bruce song, a rework of a song called 10 Years Harmony, which appeared as a single in 1974 as part of his California Music project. The version here has slightly different lyrics, and it's performed just by Bruce on piano solo. Rewritten now, because it's been almost 20 years rather than 10 years, it's now called Endless Harmony. And it's the kind of thing that I really dislike the Beach Boys doing, something that they do increasingly. I should probably say that there are 4 subjects that I really dislike hearing the Beach Boys tackle. One is the beach. They do it too much. It's just something that they fall back on when they don't have any ideas. I get tired of them singing about the beach, unless they're using it as a metaphor for something else. Second thing is, I don't like it when they are self-reverential. Sometimes it's effective. On the MIU album, on Winds of Change, when they call back to Won't Last Forever from When I Grow Up, I find that actually very affecting. But when they just throw in fun, 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 or good vibrations as words just to sort of remind you that you used to love them, I dislike that very much. I don't like them doing Christmas songs. That's something that's easy to fall back on. They do way too many, particularly in current years as solo records. They do too damn many Christmas songs. One Christmas album every couple of decades is plenty. I like Christmas records. I just don't like constant Christmas records. And finally, the thing I like least, and the thing that they begin to do here and will do increasingly, is appeal to patriotism. To me, patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel, and also the last refuge of a band that is out of ideas. And they begin to do this in Endless Harmony, singing about themselves and how they sing God Bless America and are becoming America's band. Now, they don't actually say that, but that's where this kind of thing goes from here. And I really have to say, those 4 things I dislike. I mean, they can all be used properly. The Beach Boys often abuse it when they can't come up with anything better. Anyway, there's a real editorial on the Beach Boys. So the album was a real disappointment. It hit number 75 on the charts, which was actually higher than the Light album hit, although it apparently sold far fewer copies. The singles didn't do very well, as I say. Going On went to number 83. Living with a Heartache was released as a single A-side and didn't chart at all. They did try to promote it with a release of interviews that were recorded with an English journalist named Roger Scott. It's Bruce, Mike, and Brian, mainly Bruce, talking about the album. Interestingly, Bruce doesn't refer to himself as a member of the band here, which I thought was unusual. He's interviewed just as they're mastering the record, and refers to himself as an associate of the band, but no longer a member, which is really kind of surprising, as he then ends up, as I say, on the cover for the first time since he left the band in the early 70s. So I guess his position in the band was evolving at the time. Interviews are kind of interesting. Nothing except a sticker on the front of that to show you. So the Beach Boys, of course, went on tour promoting the album. They incorporated School Days and Keeping the Summer Alive into their set that summer. They played on June 21st, 1980, the Knebworth Festival in England, and that concert was released in 2003, early 2003 in the US, late 2002 in the UK, on this CD, Good Time in the Knebworth Concert 1980. It's not the full performance, but most of it is there. And it's not bad. It's kind of enjoyable to hear a live album from that period. I also went to my very first Beach Boy concert on August 1st, 1980 at Pine Knob in Clarkston, Michigan. Here's my ticket. Again, you won't be able to see it. I'll show a photo of it. You can see tickets cost $12 with a 75-cent service fee. And it's funny to me now to think about the fact that we really complained about that 75-cent service fee. That seemed criminal to us, to be taking 75 cents as a service fee for some reason. I was nice in the days when it was worth complaining about 75 cents. This is the tour program from that tour, and also they use this again the next summer. Try to show you some pieces of that. It was the first time I've been to a Beach Boy concert. I enjoyed it. Brian was there, but not really participating. It would be the next year that I would really get a second row seat and see just how dysfunctional the Beach Boys were becoming. Dennis was there and drummed a little, but mostly just sort of ran in and out, on and off the stage. He didn't do "You Are So Beautiful," which he would often do at the end, and I'm pretty sure he didn't do it at Clarkston. I don't know. He had not participated at all in the Keepin' the Summer Alive album, by the way. He showed up apparently at the July sessions and quickly bowed out. So he was not really an active member of the band in 1980, although he was present on the summer concert tour. So that's the Beach Boys 1980. Hope you've enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe. We'll see you again next time. Thanks.